Hello everyone, Dan here from the Next Issue Podcast. On today's video, I'll be doing a review for Heart of Stone 2023. This is movies rated PG-13 with a runtime of 2 hours and 2 minutes. As of the recording of this video, around Rotten Tomato score of 28% for the critics. Audience is at 66%. I'm leaning closer to the audience, probably not as high. This movie is pretty middle of the road for me. We'll get into why. Let me give you a quick synopsis. This movie's Rachel Stone is an intelligence operative, the only woman who stands between her powerful global peacekeeping organization and the loss of its most valuable and dangerous asset. This is directed by Tom Harper, written by Greg Rucka and Alison Schroeder. Now, Greg Rucka's name may sound familiar if you follow the channel. He is also a comic book writer, very prolific comic book writer. Let's take a look at the cast. This movie stars Gal Gadot as Rachel Stone. It stars Jeng Lucy as Yang, Jamie Dornan as Parker, Paul Reddy as Bailey, Alia Bhatt as Kea Dewan, Matthias Schroegofer as Jack of Hearts. You may remember him from Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead, and Archie Madekwe as Ivo. The reason I wanted to mention Archie was in this film, and I believe underutilized, is because he's also in the Gran Turismo film. I have watched this. The review is not out in public for the channel, but if you are a patron, you may have already taken a look at it. So we'll definitely have that out in the channel later on. But let's talk about this film and why I just feel like it's very middle of the road. I think here's the biggest problem. I think we have there's a far better movie out in theaters that is very similar, if not pretty much this film. And I'm talking about Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part One. Um, so that's the one of the biggest hurdles that this movie has to overcome. That there's already a better movie about almost like it's very similar, a lot of the same tropes. Even the plot is not exactly the same, but I mean it's very familiar. For those that have seen Dead Reckoning, probably know exactly what I'm talking about. So that's the main hurdle, right? And this movie doesn't clear that, unfortunately. There are some positive things, and I'll mix it up. I don't want to just crap on the film. Um, First of all, there are some great locales. I think one of the things that these type of movies for streaming services do very well is just make it feel like a grand world, right? They go to a lot of these places, they go to like a lot of locations because they're trying to reach an international audience. So obviously, one of the best ways to do that is to include international locales. Not everything has to happen in the US or the UK or like the normal places as if you would from all the action movies that we got in the 80s and the 90s. Things can happen all over the world. I think the Fast Furious movies have shown us that people love that, they gravitate towards that, and that's been a formula that these movies have definitely been adapting. Like all these streaming service movies have been definitely exploring a lot of these places, and they look great. Like the cinematography in those shots is fantastic. We get some beautiful aerial shots of all these places. So I really like that. It's really nice to look at. Um, we also have some fun action sequences. This movie wasn't a complete slog. I think there's some great like when the action is good, it's really good, and I really appreciate it. The problem is that it's not always good, and it's not always action. Right? This movie is 2 hours long, way longer than it needs to be. And that's one of my more negative aspects to this. Not only is the movie very slow paced, it's very long. Like it's explaining everything that you're doing to it. And I understand, but then it keeps rehashing some of the same things, which is just weird. Like I think audiences are smart enough to understand a lot of these, you know, like the message of this film is a little convoluted as well. I think is like, is technology good? Well, maybe it's good, but maybe it's also bad. Like it depends on who's using it. Okay, well that's not a very clear message because you're not really saying anything. Let's see. There's some pretty cringe dialogue that, as people were talking, I was like, who who talks like that? What's happening here? What's going on? This is mainly in the first part of the film where we have a larger group of people just kind of like talking, and I feel like they're trying to endear the audience to this group as we kind of explore this world. And unfortunately, it doesn't always hit. It doesn't always connect. It just doesn't feel natural as dialogue. Um, another problem I feel with some of that character development is that it almost seems like the only way that they think we can relate to a character is via their music choice. There are an incredible number of conversations about liking different songs in this movie. Too many, I think. And I understand that's a dynamic in a group, like that can be a dynamic that you can play on, but it can't just be the only thing that you're talking about. So I don't know. I found that really interesting, really weird. As I mentioned, the story's a little convoluted. Some of these actors that I wanted to see more of, they're very underutilized. There are some parts of this world that I would have liked to explore more. Like, if you're gonna make me watch a 2 hour movie, then let's explore some of the things that you're building interestingly about this world. The movie also has a lot of different contradictions. Like, they set up some rules and don't always follow them, or they're telling you that whatever this asset is the most useful tool for this world, but then everybody's always kind of going against it, and I don't know, it's weird. I don't want to get too much into spoilers, but I think if you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Um, but although the story is convoluted, I think the premise is still pretty interesting, and like I said, it's an interesting premise because we saw something very similar in Dead Reckoning. So, like, I know that this is a fun story. I've seen it before. I really love Dead Reckoning, and I don't want to compare this too much to that film, but unfortunately, like, sometimes movies come out that are very similar at the same time, right? Like, we've seen it before. It's a thing that happens over and over again in Hollywood. So, one of my other issues was that at some points of the film, they chose to have this like grainy look to kind of emulate some of the maybe some of the old spy films of the of bygone era, something like, just to give it some different look, some different feel. But it was a little distracting because it feels very digitally done. It doesn't feel realistic. It almost feels like there's somebody just put one of those, like, Instagram or TikTok filters on top of the movie. Like, you could see it in the actors' faces, and I noticed because as I was watching in my TV, I have the 4K service for a reason, because I want these movies to look as good as they can. But then if you're putting on these filters, then you're kind of going against the reason I'm watching some of these films, which is the a good contrast with those established shots of all these locations and all that stuff. Like, that looks great. It looks fantastic. Like, just but because it doesn't have this filter, so I don't know. I thought that was kind of weird. Um, a lot of people clown on Gal Gadot's acting. I think she's fine. I don't, overall, like, she can be a little wooden at times, but I think overall, I think she's fine. I think all everybody in the cast is pretty charismatic. Jamie Dornan delivered a really interesting performance, but I gotta say, I think Jing Lucy's character was probably one of my favorites throughout the film. She felt like a real character, like a well-rounded character. And like I said, I wanted to see more of Archie. I wanted to see more of Matthias. I think these characters uh, could have been utilized more, as opposed to just kind of have them in the background. And maybe it is because I just watched the Gran Turismo film. And my biggest thing, and this is kind of how I know, especially if I'm watching a movie at home, I stopped about an hour in and I just paused the movie. I needed to take a break. I got on my phone, started checking stuff and going through TikTok and stuff like that. When a movie is super engaging and it doesn't have these like big lulls, there's no time for me to do that, even if I'm at home, right? And I think that's very telling now of like these streaming movies, that are they making them long just so you sit there watching the service, or is it because the movie really should have been 2 hours? So if, and I talked about this in my review of the Meg 2, the Trench. If I had watched it at home, I probably the same thing probably would have happened. I would have stopped and looked at my phone for a little while. You these films are competing against every other form of entertainment that we have accessible to us, especially when we were watching these films at home. So I think you have to make it very engaging. So Overall, do I recommend this film? I think this is better, if not about as good as Red Notice. Maybe I'll have to go back and check my score for that film. But yeah, these films look very formulaic. I think because we do see the same kind of sets of actors working on them. So I don't know. I don't know if I recommend this. Probably not at the top. I would say watch something if you've already seen like They Clone Tyrone or some of the other stuff that's on Netflix that's a little better. Then maybe watch this or put it on in the background. Check in with some of those big scenes or some of those more fun action scenes and stuff like that. There's a really cool sequence that takes place in the sky. I thought that was really fun. So there's something there. It just didn't fully connect. So there you have it. So let me know what you thought about this film if you've seen it. As always, thank you for watching, everyone. Remember to share, like, subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we go live. That is most Saturdays, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Stay tuned. We have more comic reviews, trailer reactions, TV recaps, all that fun stuff here in the channel. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye bye.